Joining me live now for the serious questions on what this Trump tariff bomb really means tonight. I'm very happy and privileged to be joined by Ambassador Jawed Ashraf, former Ambassador of India to France and Monaco, one of India's best-known veteran diplomats. Ambassador Ashraf, welcome. Sorry to keep you waiting. There was a live coverage going on of Parliament. Harsh Gupta Madhusudan is a fund manager and author. Willem Buiter is an American-British economist and independent economic advisor as well. We also have Kushal Mehra, who's an author and podcaster with many strong views on this topic. Ambassador Ashraf, I'm going to kick it off with you. Your first reactions to what's going on. To the Indian public, a trade deal was being negotiated. There was expectations that there could be some hardball from Trump. This one was particularly harsh. What do you think, sir?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. I think it was not very surprising because the signals were already coming. And despite some very strong, intense, frequent efforts by the Indian negotiators for a trade deal, I would say of a level of engagement and investment that is unprecedented in such a short period of time. And naturally, given that it is our largest export market, but we didn't reach any kind of a deal, and we were getting signals. But I'd like to point out two things on this, Shiv. One is that when he made this announcement, you could see that it isn't just about trade. He's brought in geopolitical consideration. Yeah. Ironically, about Russia, on which his ambivalence has been extremely well known. Second, you've pointed out right now that he said that he brought about a ceasefire between India and Pakistan by using the leverage of trade. Clearly, that is very obvious now that that wasn't the case, and that only bears out what the Prime Minister and government of India have been repeatedly stating, that there was no truth to his claim. And certainly there was no question of any discussions on trade at that point of time. The third thing I wanted to point out, that President Trump hasn't really been engaging in any trade negotiations. It's been a deal in the sense of take it or leave it. It's been asymmetric. Remember, even with his closest allies, Japan, Korea, and now European Union, it's really very one-sided. You will have to pay tariff. I don't have to pay tariff. Second, you have to buy a certain quantity of energy, defense equipment, and you have to invest several $100 billions in the US economy. This is of doubtful enforceability in the first place. The legality of what he calls a deal is absolutely questionable. So I think at the end of the day, what we have done is actually negotiate in good faith, but at the same time stand very clearly with regard to the red lines of India's interest. And having dealt with the United States for over a decade, I can tell you that some of those outstanding and sticky issues have been around for more than a decade, particularly with regard to agriculture, dairy, genetically modified crops. It was almost a deal breaker during President Obama's visit and subsequently during other summits from 2010 onwards. But we are very clear, and I think the fact that we have not succumbed, as some of the major partners have, European Union, for example, which has left many countries in Europe deeply unhappy with that one-sided deal. Yes. We have said we're ready to negotiate, but we will not succumb or surrender in the sense of sacrificing the vital interests of our farmers, of our small-scale industries, or some of the most sensitive and vulnerable sectors of our economy. And also in addition to that, I mean, you cannot force and compel a country to say that you have to buy a certain quantity of energy, you have to buy a certain quantity of defense equipment, and you're forced to invest. I mean, government of India can't tell private sector to invest in the United States in certain measures. So I think that, overall, it is, again, something which you have to juxtapose against our openness to trade. We've just had a very comprehensive India UK,
Yeah.
CETA. We've had with EFTA last year, with Australia, UAE. We're negotiating with EU. And today, in fact, in Indian Express, I have written a piece which is called Trade in the Time of Disorder,
Yes.
which speaks about a transition from multilateralism to bilateralism and regionalism. India has actually been taking a sort of a pioneering steps in this with over the past few years, recognizing the trends. So it just shows that India is open to and willing to negotiate a fair, balanced,
Yeah.
non-coercive trade agreement with the United States.
In
But if
fact,
the other side is not willing to understand that, then we'll have to find. But here, I think we need to not get into an alarm because negotiations will still continue. Second, our trade community will respond in different ways, maybe perhaps initially absorb the tariff through cost. Maybe we can offer, easier interest loans, and maybe also perhaps some ways support some of our more sensitive.
Ambassador Ashraf, sorry to interrupt you. We're just getting some breaking news precisely on what you're talking about. The government has just issued its first response, formal response on Trump's tariff announcement. This is the government's official statement. They've said they've taken note of Trump's statement and that they're studying the tariff implications. The government has said it is committed to these trade talks and committed to protecting trade interests and will protect national interests. So that's the statement that's just come out from the government at this time. I want to read that out again and I'll get a reaction from Ambassador Ashraf on that. He says, the statement says, have taken note of the Trump statement, studying tariff implications, remain committed to trade talks, committed to protecting trade interests, will protect national interest. Ambassador Ashraf, what do you think? That's what the government has said.
I mean, that's precisely what I was saying, that, we've taken note of it. We'll remain open to negotiations. 1st of August isn't the end of the life over here. There will be negotiations in August, and we will take this. But I think we're very clear about our red lines, and it is something that the United States will have to accept because these are some very vital national security and national economic interests, particularly of the most vulnerable sections of our society, the farmers, the workers, the small-scale sector, the dairy farmers, etc. Those we will take into account. And I think this has been a very good, very measured response to this. And as I said, that in the immediate aftermath of this, we will have to study whether what they have announced is inclusive of that baseline 10% tariff, which in any case will apply to everyone. Second, we'll also have to examine what happens to the sectoral tariffs, which are already there. And then proceed on that basis of seeing what they negotiate with us on. Otherwise, I think in the meantime, the government will also work with the exporters to ensure that ultimately that we are able to remain competitive in the interim period till we strike a deal with the United States, which, as I said, has to be fair, balanced, legally enforceable, and it's not something which is what we are seeing in President Trump's tendency to negotiate with himself in public, raise tariffs, lower tariffs, change it in another day. So this has to be put on a predictable platform. And in the meantime, industry and the government and the financial sector will have to work. We'll have to look through whether we can also work on currencies. For example, whether we can allow a certain degree of depreciation of the rupee to compensate for higher tariffs, provide easier loans, maybe provide some degree of subsidy to some of the most difficult, sensitive export sectors in India. So all of this will be on the table now. But this is not the end of the story.
Not the end of the story. I'm going to thank you for that analysis, and it was good to have you while that statement just came in from the government. Ambassador Jawed Ashraf, thank you so much for being with us here on this special edition of India Matters.